Hi guys. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the Jamstack and how the Jamstack is creating this exciting ecosystem of companies that's making web development more decoupled, more interesting, exciting, and offering a lot of flexibility to web developers and companies that are looking to move from a vertically integrated web development system into what is now known as the modern Jamstack. So first, to clarify, sort of what is the modern Jamstack? Well, the modern Jamstack sort of started appearing around 2014, 2015, when it actually starts to pick up some traction. And Jam, of course, is the words themselves, the letters themselves stand for JavaScript, APIs, and Markdown. And that's sort of the sexy part of the Jamstack, which is how you end up with this Jamstack, is that you're really focusing on some of the core elements in web development that have sort of materialized as what are the core web elements in web development over the years, as we've been sort of moving from these vertical integrated type of websites like WordPress and Drupal, and coming up with basically integrating this third-party API and companies that are have distinct and separate businesses. And because of the way the internet is now, we're actually able to access some of the value, the comparative advantage that some of these companies are offering, and bring that comparative advantage into our own web application. So we're able to take our web application and we're able to decouple it so that we don't have to have all the code on the server side. We don't have to have heavy code, so that when the client requests the server to send the website, the server actually has to run some code and sort of build that website, which is what WordPress does. It receives the request for the code, and then it runs through its function and initializes all kinds of variables and basically prepares the code for us. It will check the database many times to put together ultimately and build for us this page that is then going to deliver sort of on the fly, so that we get the page delivered to us as we would anticipate, just like what we're looking for. But we also have to run a bunch of code on the server side, which is going to take up a whole bunch of resources, which is going to be not only costly, but it's also going to cost in terms of time. And that is slowing down the entire website and the entire production. And it's also using up some of that server side code and a little bit of some of that server side space, and also some of the server side resources that are costly. So what the Jamstack does is it introduces what is called a static website generator. And a static website generator is unlike the dynamic website generator in that the files are actually prepared in advance and they are not prepared and generated on the fly. So when that request comes in from the client side to the server side, the web pages are already built, and they might even already be stored in the CDN, and it's really easy and quick to get them to the users. So this really speeds the website up, and it also lowers the cost of producing the website because you're actually running the functions that build the website on your own computer. It's not on the hosted computer. It's not in the cloud, or if it is in the cloud, it can be somewhere else in the cloud. That's a part of the decoupled side of the Jamstack, is that it's not all on the same machine. It's not all integrated in the same machine, and it's not all happening on the same machine. You've got this ability to decouple your technologies and include technologies from entirely different ecosystems. For example, the search ecosystem could be viewed sort of as a subsystem of the Jamstack, and that is really, it's got its own companies, and they're competing with each other with their own sorts of technologies. And when you have, let's say you have a website and you've got an e-commerce site and you have some products, let's say you have some household products, and you've also got, for example, some clothes and products. So you've got a horizontally distributed product and selection of products, and you want to actually, you want the user to be able to go onto the website and search through those products, but you don't want that search functionality built into your web application. You don't want to carry that extra cost, and you would really rather have a company that can do that more quickly and more efficiently for you, taking advantage of their comparative advantage of doing that process for you. So you want to tie into the the search engine ecosystem or the search query ecosystem. And that is something that you can absolutely do with the Jamstack. You can actually have an endpoint with your data, and then you can sign up with a service with a company that exists in this other ecosystem, and you could take advantage of the competition that they have there. You could take advantage of the innovation that they have there. You could also take advantage of the economies of scale so that you can actually get your searching done on your server, or searching done for the client once that request is made, and then you can present that view to the client, and that will be a view that takes advantage of their indexing and takes advantage of the amount of effort that has gone into building out their product, which is what ultimately makes their product something that you want to pay for. Or if you're really small, they probably even have a free tier so that you don't have to pay at all. And that is another one of the advantages of the Jamstack, is that it enables small businesses and small blogs and website owners to really sort of ramp up. So you can start with these low resources, and then you can expand your resources as your needs expand. And this is something that you're going to find pretty much all over the internet ecosystem right now. If you're using Azure DevOps, if you are working with the Atlassian ecosystem, if you are using GitHub, for example, if you're a developer, you're going to find that there are a lot of free products, and there are also a lot of paid products. And those free products are usually when you're quite small, and you're actually going to be able to find those types of products existing in the Jamstack ecosystem again. So let's just go back to these words, Jamstack. We've talked about the APIs through the search engine. Of course, there's also APIs like Zapier is kind of an intermediary API company. So if you have an API that you want to request, let's say that you want some weather data to come into your website, or you want to be able to bring in some sports scores or some stock ticker scores, then some prices, then you may want to introduce some API requests from your website. And that's really where the Jamstack starts to shine, is that you don't actually have to introduce this technology in your server. You can create this request. You could take advantage of some of the products that exist in these sort of rich ecosystems of third-party APIs that can link up to your Jamstack. So we have the APIs, and then we have the JavaScript. And now JavaScript is something that you can actually integrate on your server side with your static website generators. I use the Hugo static website generator. There are a lot of static website generators, and there are a lot of actually companies existing in the Jamstack. We're talking about 91 different companies. And what this means is that you have a lot of options for the things that you want to get done. But you also have a lot of information that's going to be going into the decisions that need to be made, so that you can come out with the kind of decisions that are going to be healthy for your organization. And what the Jamstack does is it offers you this decoupling of the different technologies. So when you're decoupling, that really means that you're not so tied in. So you have, for example, let's talk about a decoupled content management system, sort of what sits on top of the Jamstack. So if you want to change that content management system, you're no longer going to be using Tina.io, and you maybe want to use, for example, Sanity. You're going to be able to make that change without affecting the rest of your stack. So that really gives you the flexibility of being able to not just take advantage of this really vibrant and large ecosystem of companies that are innovative and that are cost effective and that are competing with each other to provide new services and new types of code bases that you're ultimately going to be able to take advantage of. So you get those resources, you get to take advantage of all of that, and then at the same time, you don't have to scale all of that, and you're not tied in, you're not locked in to one particular technology. You're actually able to more easily change out those technologies than you would if you were, for example, you had a Drupal website and you wanted to, translate that into a WordPress website. That's a pretty big changeover. You've got a lot of database that is going to be involved, and you've got a lot of very specific code that's involved as well, and you're vertically integrated, and so that's a real challenge. Now with the Jamstack, you can actually keep a lot of your stack, and then you can change out the parts, and that provides you a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility, and really gives you the opportunity again to take advantage of these great ecosystems that are creating these amazing companies that are coming out of the Jamstack. So we talked a little bit about the JavaScript. I actually didn't yet talk about the integration in the static website generator side when you're talking about integrating sort of the NPM ecosystem and Node, and how you can actually use the server side JavaScript when you produce your static website files. So when you are creating your static website files, you're actually not in the cloud. You're going to deploy your static website files to the cloud later, and so you're building out your website, and you're building it out on your own computer, and or perhaps on your own server, depending on what kind of a network that you're operating from, that your small business is operating from. So when we are typically talking about integrating with Node, what we're really saying is that when we build those website files, we're actually going to be able to take advantage of the Node ecosystem at build time, and there's going to be a lot of libraries that Node provides that are open source libraries that you're going to be able to use in tandem with your website. So that will include some API functionality. You can immediately imagine a situation where you have a blog post where you're actually posting a link, and you want to use some of that open graph technology in that link as well. So essentially, when somebody is building a blog post, or they're building a website that's going to be posted to Facebook, then there's some specific code that you can enter that's going to enable Facebook to present the website, or present the images in the way that you want them presented, the title. You have some flexibility there. So when you're pulling down a link from a blog online, you're actually able to access that as well from within your static website generator. It's an API call. It goes out to the Open Graph protocol, and it will actually bring in those images, and it will actually bring in the title and everything that the user has set up so that it can be presented on Facebook. You can present that on your own website as well. So if you have a news website, if you have, for example, a magazine, and you want to have your members to be able to do some posts and to upload images onto that website as well. If you have kind of expanded the functionality of that website to include some uploading, then you are going to be able to render that at build time when you are, or excuse me, build that at build time, so that it will render later correctly the way that you want it to render in the browser. So you can integrate that Node ecosystem with your static website generator, and that kind of brings us to what is the markdown file, and what is this M that sits in the Jamstack, where we've got the J for JavaScript, we have the A for the APIs, and then we also have the M, which is for Markdown. Now, Markdown files are a type of file that enables really a simple it enables you to simply write bold text, or italic text, or bulleted text, or even text that has some paragraphs and some headers. So you're able to take advantage of sort of the short syntax that you get with a Markdown engine, and produce the type of page that you want. So it'll actually take that Markdown, and then it will render into HTML, or into another type of file type if you want it to render into another type of file type. So that syntax is kind of what sits on the back end of a lot of these static website generators. You're actually not tied into using Markdown. You can use a lot of these other technologies, or excuse me, other file types. For example, within the Emacs ecosystem, you could actually use an org mode file, or you can use you can even use a TXT file. I mean, there are different file types that you can introduce, and you can configure your static website generator to use these different file types. But Markdown is the syntax that's sort of the easiest, and that's the one that's kind of risen above the rest of the pack when we are talking about those letters that make up the Jamstack, the JavaScript, the APIs, and of course the Markdown. So what that Markdown does is it brings us into that static website generator that we've just been talking about. And the static website generator is what's going to build out your website from the files and from the structure that you're going to make in the directory. And that is going to be ultimately what's deployed to your server. So we're already starting to see some of the different elements that exist in the Jamstack. We've got this static website generator. We've got these third-party APIs like the search engine ecosystem, and maybe the intermediaries that you can find at a company like Zapier that will integrate third-party API calls directly with your website. You can, for example, use Zapier to create a connection between your website and a mail service like MailChimp. And you can use Zapier maybe to like have your website kind of send you an email when somebody comes onto your website and they want your website to send you an email. So they make a change, they make some kind of a request, and then you get an email that says, okay, they filled out the form or they have signed up, and now you can respond, or you can even have some automated responses, which is what those third-party sort of integration is. So that's where we're talking about these APIs and some of the changes that you can make. And some of the things that you can do with these APIs. And now when we're talking about Markdown, we're talking about this exciting and vibrant ecosystem with these static website generators that introduce different technologies. Now, I typically talk about the Hugo static website generator because that's the static website generator that I have learned how to use. But there is also, of course, you also have Gatsby, of course, and you've got some other static website generators that are basically using different technologies. So it might be using React rather than Go, for example, in order to make some of those changes on the website. So the static website generator is basically where the large part of the code base is going to be written, where you're going to have that interactivity that's going to happen between your JavaScript files, between your HTML and CSS files, where everything is going to be sort of bundled together and prepared to be sent out to the server, where it can be served out to the client when the client comes in and makes a request to view the web page or to view a specific view on the web page, or even to interact via some serverless functions with the web page. For example, if you want to do some online, or if you want to do a membership, or if you want to have a login, so you present a very specific view to the client based on some data that they've entered into the inputs on the website, and that data can actually be processed by what's called a serverless function that could actually exist even in a CDN. And so it's specifically not on your own server, which is where you are actually building out that website, and you may be building that website out actually with Hugo, using the Hugo ecosystem. So now, one of the great features of this Jamstack is this decoupling. And what decoupling means, again, as I've mentioned, is that you're not locked in. You can really easily get out of the technology that you're using and then into a new technology. But decoupled also means that the different parts and pieces of your full stack web development stack that you may be familiar with, if you're coming from the old days with Drupal, or maybe even with WordPress, and now they're sort of bundled differently. So when I'm talking about a decoupled content management system, I'm really talking about, if you're familiar with WordPress, you may be familiar with that moment when you sign into WordPress in your browser, and then you're presented with a view that has the administration panel for WordPress. So you're going to have some plugins on the side. You're going to be able to update some of the plugins. You're also going to be able to make a new post and write some data into the post. And you're also going to be able to upload a picture. And you might be able to do some SEO, some search engine optimization right from within that panel. And you can even start building, typically with some of the interfaces like Elementor, printer and such so on, you can start actually building out the website right from that interface. You don't have to work from a text editor. You don't have to know CSS. You can actually take advantage of some of the themes and this entire theming ecosystem. And that's all done through what is called the content, what is in the Jamstack called the content management system. So that's the part that actually communicates with the rest of the website and enables the user to actually make those changes and do some administration on the website. Now, in the case of WordPress, that's really known to be sort of a slow feature of WordPress because, well, you are doing the administration side from the interface, from the content management system that is enabling you to interact with the code base for the website itself. When that website is actually responds to a request from the user, it's actually going to be built using resources on the server side on the fly, and that's actually going to take some time and take up some of the costs as well, which we have already talked about a little bit. So now we're going to talk about how these different decoupled content management systems actually provide a service that's unique, where you can go to your browser, or you can even serve that administration administration piece of software, essentially to view the website for operating the administration, for interacting with the static website generator, and you can serve that from your own server. But that provides an URL where you can go and make the changes on your website, or one of your employees can go and make the changes on the website, or your brother or your sister can go and make the changes on the website. And they can be in another country, in another city, and they can still access that website. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a content management system. It's the interface where you actually go and introduce the code into the website, which is actually going to be processed and change how your website looks, because you're talking about actually entering the content. So let's give an example of a content management system out of this ecosystem of 91 of these content management systems. It's a really vibrant, competitive, and innovative ecosystem, which is what makes the Jamstack such an exciting and vibrant place to be. So let's talk about a couple of let's talk about this one company that I actually like to talk about, and just keep in mind that they are one option from a lot of companies, and that they are, for example, an API-driven content management system, decoupled. They don't call themselves decoupled. I actually prefer the Git-driven content management systems because I'm a Git user, so I like to see Git, and I like to use Git to deploy the website and to make the changes on the website when I'm actually building that website out. But this company is actually an API-driven content management system, and their name is Sanity, and I'm using them as an example today, not because they are the best content management system. I actually haven't studied all of the different content management systems within the ecosystem. There are 91 different technologies so far, and that number is sort of changing that exist within the Jamstack. But I am one of the things that did jump out at me when I was looking at Sanity is how they have innovated, and they've created something that's unique, which is sort of it is reflected in the price of the Sanity product, but they have really changed something up, and I see that as an example of some of the innovation that's coming out of the Jamstack ecosystem, and that is that they have introduced this extra layer of abstraction between the content management system and the actual static website generator, and that layer is like a translation layer where they take the content that you enter in to the admin panel of the website to the content management system. And when we're talking about, again, the content that you're entering in, we're talking about the content that's going to go onto your actual blog post or to the post for your website. So if your website is informing people about some events that are occurring in town, in your local area, or in your municipality, or in your cosmopolitan, in the entire city. You're going to want to have some specific images. You're going to want to have some specific links, and you're going to want to have some text that's unique to that post. So you're going to be signing on and logging into your admin panel, which is actually your content management system, and you're going to be entering in some, likely even some short codes. You might just be entering in some markdown, or uploading an image, and then that is going to be parsed, or it's actually going to be, well, in the case of Sanity, it's parsed, but it's going to move into your content, into your static website generator, where it's going to be turned into a website. Now, what's unique about the Sanity technology is that Sanity actually takes that content and translates it into JSON. So it's going to parse the content that is entered into the input field, and that content is going to include some markdown, but it could include also HTML, and there can be images, and a lot of that content is actually then going to be translated and turned into JSON, where it is stored as data. So now you can picture that the entire content side of your website, and on the static website generators, you've got sort of the partials and the short code, and you've really got the build, which makes the website magically appear. All of the files for the website magically appear in the public folder. But then you also have this content that's entered, and there's typically directories just for the content that's being entered into the website. Now, in those directories, or where that content is being entered, in the case of Sanity, they take all that and they turn it into a JSON, and they do that so that they can provide this extra service, which is unique and separates them from some of their competitors in this very vibrant ecosystem of 91 companies within the Jamstack that are offering a somewhat content management related products, just for sitting on top of the static website generator in terms of this vibrant Jamstack ecosystem. And so what they are introducing is they're introducing basically a database that is a content database stored in JSON files that can be deployed to any kind of device. So it can be deployed to a television, it can be deployed obviously to a desktop, but you can actually have it on your desktop, and then you could have a mobile that have entirely different code, and they both actually take that code from the JSON file and then parse that code with your static website generator, and or parse that JSON with the static website generator, and then feed that code basically into the markdown files, where it is then fed into your static website generator to produce your HTML. But you could also take that code, and you could package that code, the content, and you could send that content off to an entire different website. You could send it off to a website, some automated code that's generating PDFs. You can send it off to be parsed and extracted for your technical writing documents, for the manuals that are going to support your products when your products are in the market. And you can actually take that JSON files, those JSON files, and the data, which is your content in those JSON files, and you can actually export that directly to, let's say, a billboard, for example. So the use cases are greatly expanded because you are parsing that content and then storing that content as JSON content. And that really means that you can then do so much more with the content. So I'll give you an example of some of the companies that are interested, that are actually working with Sanity. Nike is a company that is working with Sanity. And I have even heard that there is some EDI file integration as well. So when we're talking about EDI files, we're kind of moving entirely from the stack, and we're moving into sort of drop shipping. And really, we're looking now where we're going from sort of using a central repository to ensure that the product codes and the essentially the numbers that are represented on the actual website that's facing the internet, and in the actual warehousing along the supply chain that's actually available to be shipped. So there is some these are these are the same. The numbers are the same. If you make a change on the supply side over here on the warehouse, that change is going to show up immediately on the website. And that is actually done through EDI files, which are sort of outdated. Now we have sort of JavaScript files, which simplify this, and they actually are stored in kind of a, like a GitHub repo or maybe even a Dropbox or something. And there are companies that offer services that are built entirely around basically seamless integration of inventories and of payment processing as well, directly from the supply all the way up the supply chain up to the retail shop. And that is actually a really big factor in maximizing the return and the efficiency and basically the value, the bottom line for really big businesses. So really big businesses are really interested in that because they have just so many small format stores and even superstores that they really just have a logistical, a lot going on in terms of logistics. So it's really great for them to take advantage of some of that ability. Now in the Jamstack, you can actually do the same thing, just using the third-party APIs and using some Node scripts and using some creative web development to actually integrate your EDI files all the way through your supply chain so that they are updating continuously and representing the real-time products to the customers, so that when the customer orders that product, it can be drop shipped directly from the warehouse in real time. And so that's really exciting, and you can actually integrate that into your Jamstack as well. And that is something that I think Sanity has actually been looking at. They do charge quite a lot for their service, and I think there's sort of a point where you have enough traction in your business that it makes it useful and exciting to make that step. It's kind of like Salesforce. You don't really need to pay $1,000 a month for Salesforce until you're a big business and you actually have to have some tracking of some of the requests that you're going to get from your customers who are going to be sending you messages and calling, and you want to track that data and you want to be able to parse that data and find out what they're talking about. You also want to have an ecosystem where your staff can actually communicate with one another in a messaging system. And that's kind of what the sort of one just small piece of what a company like Salesforce offers for large companies. But for the small company, you just don't really need that. And there are a lot of third-party APIs that you can use in the Jamstack to provide you with those same services at even low or even no cost. So that's a really exciting part of the Jamstack, and just how innovative it is and how cost efficient it is, and how your commitments are a little bit open-ended in terms of how you can have these decoupled technologies and you can change up your technologies. So if one of the third-party APIs that you're using in that ecosystem changes their product, and on your demand side, your clients want something different, you have the flexibility. You can actually move from that one company to another provider and still manage to make things exciting and keep things moving forward in a very exciting and efficient way. So that's a little bit today of talking about the Jamstack, and I'm sure there's something that I missed, but I would like to talk more about the Jamstack, and I would actually like to have a look at some of the companies that exist in that ecosystem and some of the different services. I talked about Sanity, there's Tina.io, there's NetLify, there's Cloudinary, and there's just a lot of companies that exist in the ecosystem. And we're going to have the opportunity to talk about some of those companies, to look at some of the services that they provide, and do a little run through to give you guys kind of an idea of what's going on in the Jamstack. So thanks so much for watching, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys next time.